Cormani McClain's a Florida Gator. Is he the only transfer pickup the Gators are about to add? Brandon Olsen, Locked On Florida Gators, joining me here. So, McClain, we've talked about him here on this show. Brandon, he was looking at a number of other places, South Florida, Memphis, and a couple other kind of lower level schools were in the mix. Did Florida end up landing him because they were the highest profile school? Because he is going there as a walk-on, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the relationships that Billy Napier has built throughout his tenure in Gainesville. Like, we talk about it a lot, where you can criticize Billy Napier's on-field coaching ability all you want, and there's plenty of justified criticism to be served there. But when it comes to building relationships and keeping in touch with players, Billy Napier has been just stellar at that. I mean, you look at Jameer Grimsley, who is deciding between Florida and Alabama, decided to go to Alabama because coaching stability was more reliable there. And then Nick Saban retired, and Jameer Grimsley hopped right in the portal and immediately went to Florida. It wasn't even really a discussion. It was, okay, I trust these guys, I'm going to go there. We've seen Florida miss out on players and stay in contact, stay in touch, and then eventually land that player, whether they flip or, like Cormani McClain's case, where he hits the transfer portal and he goes to a place where he can trust that he's going to be into a solid position that can kind of make him work. That's the big point of the walk-on status, is you can earn a scholarship in December with how you present yourself the rest of the summer and this fall. You come in, you earn it, we'll give you a scholarship. And it's as simple as that. And so I think that the way Billy Napier has handled relationships, this is just another testament to that.
How would you describe Florida's defense over the last couple of years? And McClain, either this year or next year, how can he factor into making it better?
I think that the past 2 years, Florida's defense has been horrendous. If that's,
that's a word. That's a word. Yeah, you're allowed to use it.
Yeah, I've never been more confident that I can step onto a field and contribute. And I didn't make a MAC walk-on tryout, so I want to make it clear. I've never been more confident there. It was bad. You know, you had both of your starting corners in Gainesville allowed over 20 yards per catch, which means that in any given situation, you're really never out of it. If you're an opposing offense against Florida, just throw it to the outside and they allow the catch, and it's probably going to be a first down every single time. I don't think Cormani McClain is going to contribute much this season, just because I think last year at Colorado, when he got on the field, he was not good. I think that he needs to gain some weight to be a reliable contributor. And I know that a bunch of people want to go, oh, Devonta Smith played at 165 pounds. Two massive differences there. Devonta Smith is about 3 or 4 inches shorter than Cormani McClain and the same weight. And Devonta Smith didn't have to tackle people. And those are two very big differences. There's a reason Cormani McClain had a 37.5% missed tackle rate with PFF last season. He needs to bulk up a little bit to hang and bang the SEC consistently. But I think that when you look at next year, he can be a big-time player. He needs a lot of work and technical development. But if you get that from Will Harris, if he puts in the work, he gains a little bit of weight, you're looking at 1 or 2 starting spots opening on the outside for Florida next year. And Corman McClain could slot right in there. I mean, you look at 6'2", 6'3". He's got very long arms. We won't get those measurements until NFL Combine Pro Day time, but he's got very long arms. You can just see it looking at him. The ceiling's very high with Cormani McClain. It's just a matter of if he's willing to put in the work to become what he can become.
Deion Sanders, had comments not long ago taking shots at former players. He didn't do that with Cormani McClain. He did the opposite, actually. Gave a comment that I think most fans would want to see from their head coach, which is, look, we weren't able to get the best out of him. He wasn't able to make it work here, and hopefully he goes to a place that holds him accountable and makes him the best version of himself, and he wishes him well. That's what a lot of college football fans would like to hear from their head coach more often. So I feel like for Colorado, this was a legitimate instance of they thought this would work, and it did not. And Deion Sanders handling it in a, shall we say, more mature, traditional head coach sort of fashion. And I think the scholarship element's really intriguing down at Florida, and he could turn into an all-conference caliber corner if he does put in the work, if he does get into the right sort of culture. But a guy he might be going up against in practice very soon, possibly, is Elijah Badger. So he's committing the day that this show comes out on Friday. He is down to Florida, he is down to Washington, and Arizona. Three very different places, very different football team, very different. Everything's very different. Like that is an interesting trail of recruitment to say the least. But how confident are you that they land Elijah Badger, and what would it mean if they got him?
So I'll say I'm about 60% confident that he's going to be a Gator. Just because I've been burned so many times with being confident about these kids. So I'd say about 60%, but I do think that if Florida doesn't land him, this is them whiffing. Like there's no reason to not get Elijah Badger. You get to go, oh, okay, well, Billy Napier coached at Arizona State. He was the offensive coordinator before he went to Louisiana. So there's not an overlap there, but he's got the Arizona State connection that he can always kind of fall back on. He did it with Ricky Pearsall, who just came from Arizona State to the Florida Gators, was a first-round pick, 31st overall in the 2024 NFL draft. Competing for a Super Bowl immediately with the San Francisco 49ers. It's an easy selling point because you also get to go, okay, well, Washington replacing QB from last year. Arizona got a lot of turnover there just with Jed Fish leaving. Florida, Graham Mertz coming back, Ricky Pearsall gone. You can step right in and play a different role from Ricky Pearsall because they are different receivers, but you can step in right away and be the guy in this offense. That's open. That's a possibility. We talked about that with Keandre Lambert-Smith, if I'm not mistaken, with Pence. And it's like, hey, he wants to go to a place he could be featured. That's a spot at Florida. You could be featured. Ricky Pearsall had 90-plus targets last season. He's gone. You lost receivers that had more targets, also gone. There's a lot of receiving ability or receiving options here, target shares available in Gainesville. I think it's an easy selling point for Elijah Badger. So for Florida, if you can't make it happen, and if you're getting outbid NIL-wise by Arizona and Washington, buddy, you're in the SEC. That can't happen.
Yeah, I agree on the NIL front there. And for Badger, if he wants to be a wide receiver one, which I know that he can be, Florida's got to be the most appealing of these choices here. Now, if he goes to Washington, is he going to play? Yeah, of course. Is he going to get plenty of targets? Yeah, he will. If he goes to Arizona, will he get thrown the ball plenty? Yeah, probably. But will he be the top guy? No, it's Tetairoa McMillan at Arizona, and it's either Denzel Boston or Jeremiah Hunter at Washington. It'd probably be kind of a revolving door, and I think Badger is really good, and he's coming out of a season in which he was barely throwing the football because Arizona State didn't have anybody to throw him the football there. And if you're Graham Mertz at Florida, you have to be looking at this move saying, please go get me this guy. Give me a wide receiver one. I think it, at the very least, would help Florida be competitive with the toughest schedule in the country.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Trey Wilson, last year was a freshman All-American, but I've said he played a gadget role last year. 88% of his yards came after the catch, but that's because so many of his targets were behind the line of scrimmage. He was just catching little pop passes and screens and making plays. And I do think that he'll take the next step, but he's not a proven wide receiver right now. So much of what we saw from Trey Wilson was being used as a gadget offensive weapon, whatever you want to call it. And that's not even a knock. You do that and you're exceptional at that. But as far as playing wide receiver, running routes, creating separation downfield, we haven't seen that from Trey Wilson. We have seen it from Elijah Badger. And if you think Trey Wilson can take the next step, which I do think he can, imagine having both of them on the field at the same time then. And I think that just gives Florida a huge leg up, like you said, with the toughest schedule that we've seen any college football team have to go through in at least a very long time, maybe ever, depending on how things work out.
Well, there are a lot of years to look at forever, but hard to say that they wouldn't be in the mix at the very least for the toughest schedule that we have seen. Brandon Olsen, Locked On Gators, trying to soften the blow of that schedule with Elijah Badger. We'll see how it all plays out. Brandon, thanks as always.
Thank you.
The Mountain West win totals are out. Are they going to get a team into the playoff? Might be tough. That's coming up next, along with the most shocking thing I've ever seen from our friends at FanDuel.